But you're also going to see this little esoteric club of missionaries that, we have this kind of esoteric missionary knowledge, and you Bible-thumping pastors of a local church don't have a clue about what missions is about. That is the most damnable lie out there. How do you plant a church in the most remote and exotic place on the planet? The same way you plant a church in New York City. Now, yes, there are language things, there are cultural things, and everything else, but what you need to understand is that we do the Great Commission the same way that a man here in this church, everything that the man if this is a healthy church, and I've heard by everyone it's a good church, a healthy church, everything that the pastors are doing here is the same thing you do to fulfill the Great Commission in the most exotic, remote place on earth. It's all about training evangelists, pastors, and teachers, that they be elder qualified and that they go out under the authority of that church, taking the same doctrine, the same ethic, the same spirit of that church, and planting that church somewhere else. Now, you say, well, can anyone else be a missionary? Yes, and this is what's so beautiful about the idea of a sent one. We all know that that the eldership and what we would say evangelist, pastor, and teacher, that is the work of the men in the church. Well, what about women? Can they be apostles of the churches? Can they be sent ones? Yes. But how? And this is what would instill dignity in women who feel the call to go overseas. My dear friend Matt Glass, okay, he's over in Indonesia with his family. And let's say that they have all these kids and really struggling, and Amanda says, I really need some help for a while. And the church that sent them goes, well, we know some of the women who were just very close to Amanda. And they make, like in 2 Corinthians chapter 8, they make a public call. Is there a woman here who would like to go and assist Amanda for a month and a half and to help her? And remember what happened? Paul made the public call. God put it on Titus's heart, a subjective, real calling, and Titus said, I'll go. So that a woman comes to the elders and says, I will go. I've talked to my husband. He's in agreement. I will go. The elders know that woman. And you guess what? They send her. Not with the authority to act as an evangelist, pastor, and teacher, but with the authority to take care of this specific task. And so it's the same way. So you have, every ministry on the mission field must have its focus in the planting of churches. But while that happens, there may be this open door for a school. And so what do? Now we're talking about the fellow laborers of these evangelists, pastors, and teachers. And we say, we've got a guy here who would make an excellent headmaster. He will go and start that church in cooperation with the elder qualified men that we have there. Do you see what I'm saying? It's all focused around that. Now, I know that in the Reformed community, because of Calvin and a few others, people believe there's no such thing as evangelists. But Charles Hodge, Charles Spurgeon, and others would disagree, and so would I. And maybe that's what's wrong with our Reformed movement today, is you don't have anybody preaching on the streets. Let me hit that for a minute for you pastors. I want you to think about something. The work of a pastor. Recently, I've been looking at certain really famous pastors, and I've been asking myself, I don't think they're pastors. And people go, why? Well, because they're traveling like 25 weeks out of the year. I'm sorry, I don't care how great of an expositor they are, there's a problem. Because those of you who are pastors, you know one thing, if you're a faithful pastor, it's 24/7, 365 days a year. I mean, it's difficult. Now imagine this. So we have this idea, we have elders, okay? And they're kind of all pastor teachers. But most of the pastors that I talk to, because they're surrounded by Sodom, because their members are so affected, most of the pastors that I know who I really respect, other than doing their sermons, they are pastoring. And they're wore out. And then I talk to them, and most of them will go something, you know, I used to go out and witness on the streets. I used to do all these things, but the sheep, my burden is for them, and I can't even keep up with their needs. What if we looked at this differently? That in the elders, what would happen? And I'm going to make it very, I'm going to oversimplify. What if we had a man who he loved to feed his people in the pulpit, and for him, counseling was just expository preaching to one person. And he just ate, slept, thought, dreamt of pastoring. But he knows there's these other things. There's evangelism that ought to be done. What if another elder, instead of thinking of an evangelist as this itinerant that runs all over the place, which there is room for that, what if one of the elders, full-time elder, was the evangelist? Every guest who came into that church, he went after them. I mean, it was his, not he does it and we agree with it. No, it's official. This guy is an evangelist elder qualified man. He is an elder. He does have something of a pastor's heart, but he is an evangelist. It's his gift. Every guest that comes in that church, he goes after them. Every parent he's talking to, how are your children? How is this? Can I come over? Can I do this? He takes the other. Young men are starting to come to the church and they have that evangelistic zeal. He's taking them out into the streets. He's witnessing with them. Now, sometimes in these bigger church, I'll ask somebody, so what do you do? I'm the pastor of administration. I go, no, you're not. Yes, I am. No, you're not. You're a deacon. You're a deacon. What if we had, now just humor me for a moment, because it may not have to be this way. What if there was a full-time deacon on staff? I mean, and I'm not talking about someone who got called a deacon. I'm talking about a man who's been trained 3 or 4 years in the art of what it means to be a biblical deacon. What if you had a man who literally slept, dreamt, ate, drank, service, and then he was able to find all the other men and women in the church, not saying women being deacons, but find all those that have the gift of service. And he organized them. And he was passionate about making sure all this happened. And the administration. You know, most pastors can't do the work of pastoring, even though they're sincere, because they're doing the work of a deacon. That's what I'm saying. We're all about these platitudes of all this, you know, big language and all this stuff. And I'm going, hey, let's just look at a few of these things. You know, don't mow the lawn if the house is on fire. Just what would that be like? So that now this pastor who loves the sheep, but he really doesn't have the gift of evangelism, now he's not walking around condemned all the time that I'm not able to soul win and do this or that, and there's so many balls being dropped, because there's a man who that is his gift. These are some of the things that I wish that we would think about, instead of just keep beating the same drum over and over. And so when we talk about missions, another thing about missions, it is would I let those youth run the church for 2 weeks. Take the pulpit, do everything, do the counseling. I'm certainly not going to send them to the mission field. Why would I send a lesser man to the mission field? If I wouldn't allow him to be an elder in my church, you should not be sending him anywhere. And on the mission field, we need the elder qualified men who are proclaimers. We need, guess what we need? One of Heart Cry's biggest needs right now are deacon qualified men. That means men who can deal with the banking, the legal, all the accounting, to send money to 70 different countries, and hopefully we don't get arrested. Do you see? There's all these gifts that God has given people, and we totally ignore it. Why? Because we got the charismatic prosperity preachers talking about gifts, so we run completely the other direction, and no one in our church even knows what their gift is, and elders aren't helping them. How do you practically get... Do you realize that the evangelist, pastor, and teacher are given for the equipping of the saints? Equipping them how? In their giftings. How much time have you spent helping each member discern their gifting? Because that's a talent, and on the day of judgment, they're going to be held accountable for it. And you're not doing anything because you just want to preach like a Puritan. These are things that need to be considered, and they're extraordinarily important. How much burden does the church carry? Not because women are ungodly in the church, but because women have not been instructed in womanhood and the art of the house. Oh, we say, well, we had a conference. Yeah, 3-day conference? That means nothing to me. What about 3 or 4 years of women being instructed and helped? What about fathers? We don't have a youth group. Yeah, and you don't have fathers either who are training the young people because you're not teaching them. Will you throw a book at them? Do you see what I'm saying? There's a lot of holes in what we're doing. And I think I need to be quiet now because I'm probably making a lot of people mad. But it's true. It's true. Another question?